said, my name is Jacob Kleinhenz from Maria Stein. I grew up just down the road. I graduated high school 2016. Growing up, I'd say as a little boy, sports were a huge part of my life. Probably too much, I'd honestly say, but sports were my passion, I would say, honestly, kind of growing up through junior high and high school and graduation. Kind of looking back now, I would honestly say that, faith and school too, I would say, were probably a little ways down the priority list. Kind of start off with a short story between the meaning of Quo Vadis. Some of you probably know this story, but it's an interaction between Jesus and St. Peter. So St. Peter was in Rome trying to build up the Catholic Church and establish the church in Rome. And obviously there was a ton of persecution from, he was just getting a lot of pushback. A lot of people didn't want to hear what he had to say. And so St. Peter, it got super hard, and he was like, deuces, I'm out of here, I'm leaving, I'm done with this, moving on to the next city. And so St. Peter, he's fleeing Rome essentially. And the risen Christ meets him on a road, leaving the city. And you can imagine what this would have looked like. You picture this in your head. You can Google an interaction between St. Peter and Jesus and Quo Vadis, and you can see the picture that has gotten famous that's out there. And you just picture St. Peter looking at Jesus, and Jesus has a cross on his shoulder, and St. Peter's like, Quo Vadis, which is Latin for where are you going? And Jesus looked at St. Peter and he was like, I'm going back to Rome to be crucified again. And he walked past him. And at that moment, St. Peter had to think, like, what am I going to do? Am I going to run away from my responsibility, from my mission, from what Jesus himself told me to do and establish the church in Rome and build it up? And even though it sucks, even though it's hard and it's not easy, and he had to make that decision. And as you guys know, he turns around and he goes back to Rome, and he's persecuted, he's arrested, and he's crucified upside down because he didn't think he deserved to die the same way as Christ died. So he's crucified upside down, and he establishes the Catholic Church in Rome. And it's like, he obviously made a heck of a decision to do that, right? And I look back at a lot of decisions that I've made, just even like small everyday decisions. And I'm like, so incredibly often, do I not put Christ first? Too often is he way kind of towards the bottom of the priority list. When you get busy, the first thing that flies out the window is your faith, is your prayer time, is the time that you invest into, whether it's spiritual reading or scripture or, coming to Quo Vadis night or church or confession, things like that. The first thing to go, I feel like, is usually the faith. And that's how it was for me growing up. It was like super busy, involved in a lot of stuff. And too often it's just like, oh, I'm too busy. I don't really care to go to youth group. I go to religion class because mom and dad tell me to go to religion class. I go to mass because that's just what we do. And, it runs in the family. Everybody's Catholic, and that's just what we do. We go to church on Sundays, and mom and dad just super strong in the faith, and they raised me and my younger sisters as really well. And so they gave us a solid foundation, and I just too often, would put things in front of the Lord. And so eventually graduated high school in 2016, went to college at the Wright State Lake campus, majoring in business, minoring in marketing. During college, coached high school baseball at Marion Local, and just love, being around the game and sports and that sort of thing. Having a kind of a different outlook on sports now, whereas when I was younger, but I would definitely say, like sports and hobbies and whatever your guys' hobbies are and things that you like to do, it's like you can do those things and honor God at the same time. Whereas I was doing them for my self-glorification, or for just to, to be as successful as we can as a team, but like not even thinking about God during that. So, yeah, and I would say, yes, kind of gone through college, graduated in 2020. It was that later on that year that I, in the same year, met my wife, Claire, beautiful wife, Claire. Met her, we got engaged, met her in January, got engaged in October. Later that year, we ended up getting married in June of 2021. And then this past May, our baby Eve Maria was born. So life is full and it's awesome. But I kind of want to talk tonight about spiritual warfare. And I think really what's huge is realizing that we're in a battle between good and evil every single day. Like every day we wake up, and I think really we just need to realize that God is trying to win over our soul and get us to heaven, but at the same exact time, the devil is trying to win over our soul and get us to fall and go to hell. And an interesting statistic is that only 17% of Catholics actually believe in Satan. So that leaves 83% of Catholics that like think that Satan's like fairy tale or outdated or just non-existent, basically. Like, so that's kind of a problem. I look at that as like, that's not good to realize put yourself, I guess, in the devil's shoes, or if you're an enemy and you are trying, let's say you're trying to attack your enemy, right? Let's say you're in a battle or something. What you would probably do, the easiest way to win, is to make your enemy think that you don't even exist. That is like, you're gonna win countless victories. It's gonna be so much easier to win if you trick your enemy into thinking that you don't even exist. So they're not even gonna know how to defend themselves, or they're not gonna even be aware, or they're not gonna have their guard up. And so, kind of living in the reality that, Satan and evil is, it's real. And, we always have to have our guard up. There's a story, Jesse Romero, he's a nationwide, worldwide speaker, author, very accomplished, but he's out in California. He used to be he worked for a prison when he was in his lower 20s. He was 21 years old, and he went to Mass one day in LA, and he heard that nobody can say Jesus is Lord except with the power of the Holy Spirit. And so he's like, man, I'm gonna go to work, and I'm gonna ask some of these guys if they can say Jesus is Lord, these serial killers and mass murders. And so he goes to work, and the prison he works in is the biggest prison in the world. They're all the men in the prison are serial killers. Half of them are satanic killers, meaning they kill for the devil. And the other half are just like mass murders. They're not necessarily going out and seeking to kill someone in honor of Satan. So he comes up to this first guy, and his name was Ramirez, and he comes up to him, and Jesse says, Ramirez, I'll go downstairs and I will fix you a hot, like Thanksgiving style meal, because the officers had like super great meals, but the prisoners, they ate crap. It wasn't very good. And so he was like, I'll get you this awesome, hot, big meal, and for free. I'll give it to you. All you have to say is Jesus is Lord. And so he's like, oh, I can say that, no problem. And so Ramirez, the prisoner, he's in his cell, and he starts saying, G, and like something, he starts putting his hands up on his throat, and like something's like physically like choking him. And he can't say Jesus. He can't say Jesus is Lord. He can't even get the name Jesus out. And he falls to his knees. He falls down in his cell, and he's like getting choked to death, basically. And Jesse's like, oh my gosh, all right, all right, and closes the cell door, walks to the next guy, and that first guy was a satanic killer, actually. So he was, killing for the devil, and so he goes to this next guy, and this guy wasn't he was a mass murderer, but he wasn't a satanic killer, and he's able to say Jesus is Lord, no problem, and so he got his meal. Goes to a third guy, as another satanic killer, and the same thing happens to him, where he's like, gee, it's like something's like choking him, and he can't like breathe, and he falls to his knees, and he's like about to pass out, and all right, stop, all right, like closes the door and goes to the next one. And so that happens 3 times, where a satanic killer isn't able to say Jesus is Lord. And I think it was 2 or 3 times where like just one of the common prisoners in there was able to say it. But I share that story honestly just to kind of make us realize the battle that we live in, honestly. Because like when I was in high school, early on in college, and I feel like so many people today, you wake up in the morning and you don't even realize that you're in a battle. You think, oh, I'll just kind of go about my day, make decisions here and there. It's like lickety split, don't really think too much about the choices I make. But obviously that's not gonna cut it, in terms of becoming a saint, in terms of getting to heaven and bringing as many people with you to heaven. And so I think, man, like what is one thing that like really, I guess Satan would kind of work through in order to make us not make the best choices or the best decisions, or essentially keep us from becoming the men and the women that we're called to be. And I feel like one of those a big thing, at least for me it was, and I feel like I see it in a lot of youth today and young adults, is through our friends, the people that we hang out with, on the weekends and on weeknights or wherever. And it's said that you become like the 5 people you spend the most time with, which makes sense. If you hang out with somebody if your buddy likes to just sit on the couch and eat potato chips and watch TV and play video games all day, then chances are you're probably going to, start to become like that person. Maybe you won't do it all day, but maybe you'll do it 3 hours a day or 5 hours a day, or, more time than what you really should be. And so friendship was deeply rooted in a man named St. John Paul II. His feast day was yesterday, actually, October 22nd. And so this guy, he was the Pope from 1978 until 2005 when he died. He's already a saint, and he is, some people call him St. John Paul the Great. Some other people call him St. John Paul the Beast. And I like to call him St. John Paul the Beast because he was a beast, man. He just lived such an incredible life. So he grew up in Poland, and the communists come into Poland, and I'll backtrack a little bit. JP2 is what a lot of people call him, St. John Paul II. JP2, he lost his mom when he was 8. He had one sibling, which was his brother. Lost him when he was like 12 or something like that, and then lost his dad when he was like 20. So he lost all his family by the time he was like 21. And so he goes to seminary, becomes a priest, eventually becomes a bishop in Poland. But the communists, they come into his country, and they're like, we're going to take your faith and your Catholic culture, we're going to take your church, we're going to make you believe what we want you to believe, and take your freedoms away, and things like that. Things that, you can think about what communism consists of. And he's like, no, not me, not us, not the church, not my family, not my friends, not my parishioners. Like, he stood up against it, and he stood up and against it, and he brought people together, he banded people together like warriors on a battlefield. And how often do we see, I look at myself, and it's like, man, how many opportunities do I miss from standing up and, speaking a little truth here and there, saying the right thing even though it's super hard to say it. And it's like, JP2, he really was a beast. He brought so many people to heaven. He was a leader. He was not afraid to speak the truth, even when it was hard, and even when people would make fun of him or not have much respect for him anymore, things like that, So, yeah, and that's what we're called to become, warriors for Christ. But I mean, the reality is we live in a culture that is the most anti-God ever. And it's like, I mean, you think about it, it's like, well, like abortion, for example, science being able to prove that it's like a living human being inside the mother's womb, and we're basically, we say it's okay to kill a little baby. And it's like, so many things in our society and culture and throughout the world that it's just blatantly obvious how the devil's working. And just kind of over time, even the past 5 years with the transgender movement, all that, and little 5-year-old boy doesn't even think he's a 5-year-old boy anymore because he thinks he's a girl and things like that, and it's like, even like the past 20 years, and you look at the past 60 years, and you look over time, over history, how the devil has worked throughout that time, and you're like, man, just so many little decisions, maybe a little decision here, little decision here, little decision here, adds up, and like, wow, we really have gotten off track the past 60 years or 5 years or whatever it is. You think about Vince Lombardi, he was a Super Bowl coach for the Green Bay Packers, won a few Super Bowls. After that time span, he won a few Super Bowls in just a pretty short amount of time. A couple of years later, his team's not doing very good. And a reporter or somebody asked him, what's going on? Like, how are you guys were so successful, and now you're not. You kind of suck. You're not very good. And he was like, well, there's a lot of little decisions that me and my coaching staff maybe, or even the players, people within the system, have made over the past couple of years that, granted, weren't big decisions, but just those small decisions over time added up, and it drifted us away from success. And you look at it now, it's like, we're not trying to necessarily win a game. Our game, I guess you could say, is to get to heaven. And either every day we're taking steps closer to heaven, or steps essentially closer to hell. I remember my junior high basketball coach, we had practice one day. It wasn't a very good practice. It wasn't a very good practice. And I remember he kind of got us all together at the end, and before we broke out to head home, and he was like, guys, you're either taking steps closer to winning our next game, or you're taking steps closer to essentially losing. You're either, every single day at practice, you're either getting better or you're getting worse. You're preparing to win or you're preparing to lose. And that stuck with me, honestly, because it's like, you could take that mentality into anything that you want to succeed in. And I think especially with our faith, especially, we have no idea when we die. I could die tonight, I could die tomorrow. It's like, we don't know when our life is up. And essentially, that means we need to be ready to die having won the fight and having, essentially on the path to heaven. And it's those little decisions, though, that can trip us up and make us fall. And I'll kind of expand on that a little bit later down in a few minutes. But honestly, kind of just at the end of the day, some of us might be like, man, this is all good and stuff, but I don't really know if I want it. I don't know if I want to become a saint. I don't know because then I have to not many people are super into their faith, or not many people are even talking about faith, or, to come to a Quo Vadis night, to go to church, to, go to confession, to pray, or even to, be in a Bible study, or things like that. It's like, I guess, I don't really know if I want it even, But it's like, the truth is like, we're all called to become a saint. We're all called to become a saint whether we like it or not. And that's like our duty, that's ingrained in our soul, that God put there. And it's like, the reality is, your great-grandchild could be driving down 119, and they could look up to their right. They're driving down 119, they look up to their right, and they see a big, beautiful church of their great-great-grandfather, Jeremy. And Jeremy, he loved football. He was a great quarterback in high school. He not only was he like good at football, let's say, but he also just like, he was a town guy. Like, everybody loved him. He brought people, like St. John Paul II, he brought people together like warriors on a battlefield in terms of the faith. He brought so many people with him to heaven when he died, and so many people were changed from him, and even in small things. But anyways, St. Jeremy's great grandchild's driving down 119, looks up to the right, sees a big, beautiful church. And in the front, there's a statue of his great-grandfather about ready to throw a pass. Just a statue, about ready to throw a football. And it says, St. Jeremy's Catholic Church. And Jeremy, he lived his life. Maybe he didn't do something super extraordinary, but he lived his life. He became a saint. He brought a lot of people to heaven with him. His family, his friends. He was a dad. He was... let's say he was the leader of his family in terms of the spiritual and prayer life, and Jeremy, he became a saint. His great-grandchild's driving down the road and sees the beautiful church that's been built, and it's like, that's the reality that we live in. But it's so we don't think that's possible. We don't think, the idea of becoming a saint is like, oh yeah, I don't know if that's for me. But like, we have to realize, like, not only is it possible, but that's what we're called to become. Like, we're called to become, all of us you guys are all called to become great saints. You weren't meant to fit in. You were born to stand out. It's like, too often we just grow up. This is how I was. Like, just grow up, try to fit in. Don't want to look too different, because if you look a little different, then people will talk about you, or you just want to be in your friend groups. You don't want to, you know what I mean? And it's like, the devil wants to keep you in his freaking box, and he doesn't want you to get out of that box that he put you in. Because if you do, he loses control, and he just wants to keep you basically squashed in his little box and keep you there. He doesn't want you to become the man or the woman that you're called to become. But, that's kind of the devil. He makes us think more about our insecurities, our fears, like, simple things. Comparison is a big one. Comparison is a thief of joy. It seriously is. The more you compare, the less happy you're going to be, honestly. It's like this fall, I'm trying to plant grass in my backyard. There's a strip trying to plant grass, and I'm putting a lot of time into this grass, watering it, fertilizing it, and things like that, trying to make sure everything's going to grow right. And I'm caring way too much about what my neighbors are going to think about my darn grass. It's like, it's grass, who cares? And it's like, comparison, it's real. It's a real thing. But the devil, he puts those thoughts, those temptations, that fear of like, oh, what's Joe Schmo going to think about me? Or it could be even a Facebook post. If I share this thing, what's Johnny gonna think about me now? Things like that. It's like the devil's always putting that fear, that insecurity, all those thoughts, that doesn't come from God. And so kind of a couple, I guess, real life examples. I'll go with the guys first. Let's say you're out at a buddy's house or wherever you're at, and your buddies are, let's say you're talking about a girl, you're kind of talking about her like an object, or you're degrading her, or, just not saying very pure things, I guess you could say. And it's like, man, it's so darn easy in that moment in time to just kind of sit there and be like, all right, I know what they're talking about isn't good. I'm just not going to say anything. Like, that's not good enough. Like, that's not even good. Like, us, like, we are called to, in those moments of time, or things like that, to, step in, interject the conversation and be like, guys, like, we're not, supposed to be talking about women like this, or, kind of gearing the conversation another way. And I mean, like, for the ladies, you could, like, let's say you're at a lunch table, you're out to lunch, let's say you're at, say you go to Panera Bread. I'm not a very big Panera fan, I don't go to Panera a whole lot. There's one time actually, my wife Claire and I went out to eat or lunch or something on the way home from somewhere, and she got Panera, and I went across the parking lot and got hothead just because that's how I am. And so, and it's like, let's say you're out to eat at Panera for lunch with your lady friends, and they start gossiping about, oh, do you hear what Jenny said, or what she did the other night, or things like that. And it kind of talking about someone negatively. And it's like, it's so, you just want to add fuel to the fire. Like, how good does it feel to add fuel to the fire? But how sinful is that too? Like, how the devil just kind of tricks us into, making it feel like everybody's doing it. It's fine to add to it, or to maybe not to even say anything. But it's like those moments in time, where it's hard to step out and to, speak up when we're called to speak up, even though it's not very easy. So kind of going back to spiritual warfare and things of like, where, I guess, in our lives is the devil coming through the cracks in the wall, essentially. And so I would definitely say, culture today, I'd say music is a big one. Music is a really, really big one. I love country music. I love hip hop. I love rap. I love Christian music. I love a lot of music. Big music guy. And high school I had like hundreds of songs on my phone, and most of them were very bad. And, I didn't know it at the time, but I was like, definitely songs I shouldn't have been listening to. But honestly, you think about that, and it's like there's a lot of songs that like society has normalized and says is, they're super popular songs and they're really good songs, and they have their music videos on YouTube have a couple million views and everything like that. But like at the same time, they're like sexualized lyrics, or they're cuss words, or it's like using God's name in vain, all sorts of things, but we don't, at least when I was like listening to that kind of music, it's like, well, I just like the beat, I just like the beat. I just like, how it sounds. I don't really think about the lyrics. But we gotta think, like, words, like, have power. And when you are, like, filling your brain with words that are straight from the enemy, it's a direct, the devil uses this every day, like, constantly. He uses music every single day, music that we might like. And it's like, when we listen to that stuff, that fuels our brains and our minds, and even like if we're in the car with our family or our friends or wherever we're at, we're feeling not only our minds but also like the minds of those that we're with, and like that is a gateway that the devil like has an influence in you, and that like attracts demons. You think about like demons, and how they like demons study us. Demons study us. They know our habits. They know what we like to do, what we don't like to do, how to keep us away from doing what we should be doing. And they're super smart because they are angels, right? Because in the beginning of time, all the angels, there's so many angels. There's a ton of them. But there was a third of them that rebelled against God. And little Saint Michael, the archangel, he is on the second, so there's 9 levels of angels, and the second lowest level of angels is Saint Michael, the archangels, and he stepped up against Lucifer, who was one of the angels that rebelled against God, and he defended God, but God sends a third of the angels, which was a crap ton of them, a third of them to hell, and so now those guys, those angels or demons, they're the ones that are, trying to get us to, trip up and to sin, and when we listen to that kind of music, that's attractive to them, and that's how one little decision, it's like, oh, I just really like this song. So, all right, that's one little decision you made, and the next day, and then 2 years down the road, or maybe it's a month, or maybe it's 10 years, and you're like, wow, I really drifted. Another big one I feel like is TV shows, movies, and again, you could be like, gosh, like all my friends love it. There's only a couple of sex scenes. There's only a couple of times where they use God's name in vain. It's like, okay. There's an excuse for everything, though. There's an excuse for absolutely everything, to either to not do it or to do it. You can make an excuse for everything, and you can sit yourself down and think like, all right, is this something that God would want me to be doing? As it's a hard decision. It's like, probably not. And so it's those small things, guys. It's those small things that add up. It's like, oh, I'm not directly killing anybody. Oh, I'm not the producer of the movie or things like that. But it's the small decisions, the small everyday decisions where we're either taking those steps closer or those steps further away. And we got to have our guard up. We always got to have our guard up, because it's like the moment we take our guard down, the devil's in it, right? Like right away. So, I mean, you could, whatever you watch, Netflix history, if you look at your Netflix history or YouTube history, or whatever you watch videos or shows on or whatever. So you compare your history, compare that to the history of an atheist, someone who directly does not believe that God even exists. So compare the two histories together, and would they look comparable? Would your history look like someone's that doesn't even know who God is? Would they be, hopefully they'd look decently different, right? But that's just, culture and society and the things that are in our face 24/7. Culture just kind of normalizes over time, and sin has been very normalized, and so this is an interesting statistic, and kind of for you guys, when you get married and have future kids and things like that, and just to be aware of for people in your life. The first exposure to pornography in the United States, the average age of first exposure to pornography in America is 8 to 11 years old. It's like, that's like 8 years old to second grade. And, to kind of realize, stuff is out there, and, we have to have our guard up, because when we take our guard down even for a split second, like the devil comes in like he knows how to, right? And, so we gotta realize, kind of difference, even the difference between like mortal sin and venial sin, like pornography, masturbation, like getting drunk, and like Father Mike Schmitz even has said, using God's name in vain. All those things are mortal sins. And, if I die in mortal sin, as we know, we're straight to hell, right? If you die in mortal sin, you don't really have a chance. And so, if you fall, boom, gotta get to confession right away, right? And, but, that takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of freaking discipline. So when I was in high school, I played football in the program and everything, and super successful. We won state 3 years when I was in high school, and you look at it and it's like, what really is it that takes a successful program? What's the underlying theme? And I really do think it's discipline, or any success. You can have success at whatever, studying. You want to be a straight A student. What does it take? It takes discipline. It takes saying no to the things that you got to say no to, even though it stinks and you don't want to say no to it. We would lift weights at 6 a.m. in the morning. It's like waking up at 5. I woke up at 5:20 a.m. It was like, it stunk. I hated it. Did not like it. It was the worst. It's terrible. 2 days, not very fun. Not very fun at all. But you look back, you're in December for state weekend, and you're like, man, I'm thankful for that they put us through 2 days and ran our butts off. It's like you're thankful for it. But in the moment, it's like, it's so easy to make excuses. It's so easy to make excuses, honestly, and to say, I don't need that, another big one that sin comes through is our phones. I think probably one of the biggest. Our phones are a big one, and not to say that phones and technology is bad. We can use our phones for either good or for bad. But even like myself included, I think it's so common to use our phones for bad, basically. And I would say that even I am a little bit. Everybody probably is to some degree addicted to their phone, and so there's a reason for that. There's science. All these big businesses, iPhone, Apple, Samsung, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, all these humongous companies, they know that there's this chemical in our brain called dopamine, and when we go on our phone, or if we hear a bzz, bzz, or like a ping, like in our pocket or whatever go off, our brains release this chemical called dopamine. And dopamine is an addictive chemical. It's a feel-good thing, you know, because you get that buzz or you get that ding and you get that notification, that little red dot or whatever it is. You feel good for a little bit, right? And it attracts you to get onto your phone and spend time on it. And so all these companies, massive companies know this. So they design their apps to get us to stay on their app as long as possible, to essentially make us be as less human as possible. Because when we are less human for them, that makes them more richer because we're on their apps more and we spend more time on it. And so they just try to get us to be as addicted to our phone as absolutely possible. And so, yeah, that's something, you know, to definitely be aware of. And I feel like a big one for me that's helped me a lot in this area, because I mean, it's just so often, it's like you go on your phone, it's like 10 minutes go by, 20 minutes, hour, 3 hours go by, and it's like, man, where'd that time go? But so you can go on your settings and you can turn off notifications from Facebook or from YouTube or even your email. You know, I didn't turn off on my phone for my phone calls or text messages, but like you can turn that off so then your phone's not always lighting up or dinging or buzzing or whatever, you know. So that's a little simple way that has helped me. But you think, I watched a documentary on this last year, and like the big wigs in Facebook, they don't even let their kids have Facebook or these other apps because they know how addictive it is. They know how dangerous it is. It's like a 5-year-old boy could easily find pornography on the internet, no problem. Like it's at his fingertips. 5-year-old boy, 3-year-old girl. It could be any age, you know. And there's just so many gateways that the devil enters through that we, you know, gotta have our guard up, gotta be aware. Because when we're not aware or we don't have our guard up, then, you know, good things won't happen. So, let's see here. Yeah, and it's like, are you ever really happy after being on your phone for like a super large chunk of time? Like, probably not, you know. So a couple of things that I want to close up shop with tonight. What's a big one? You know, at the end of the day, what's going to help you like a lot, really, maybe one of the most, is confession and frequent confession. Monthly confession. Really, we need to be going to confession every single month. St. John Paul II would go to confession every single week, and he was the Pope. And I sin a lot more than the Pope, I would think. I sin every day, multiple times a day, and there's 365 days in the year. So if I go to confession every month, that's only going 12 days. That's on paper, you know, 12 out of 365. It's like, hopefully that doesn't look too daunting, right? So I challenge you guys, if you're not, you know, go to confession every single month. Challenge your family members, your friends, you know, to make that just a routine habit. My parents did that for us kids, and like even when I was not making very smart decisions at all, I remember specifically my freshman year of college, believe it or not, I was still going to confession every month. And it's like, why? You know, well, because it was instilled in me that this is going to be, it just became a habit, right? And it's habitual. And once you establish a habit, it's a lot easier. So, you know, even if you go a month and you forget the next month, like you don't forget it, you know, you keep at it, even though maybe you fail sometimes. I have a interesting story to share with you from St. Philip Neri. So this is kind of another way that I don't know, I'll just read it and have you guys kind of listen and see what you think. So the story has been told that one day St. Philip Neri was busy hearing confessions in the parish church. A long line of penitents were waiting for the sacrament, and St. Philip went about diligently hearing the confession of each one. This went on for some time, until finally Father Neri absolved what appeared to be the last penitent, since no one else entered into the confessional. He looked out in order to be sure no one else was there, and was surprised to still see a long line of people waiting patiently for the sacrament. Father quickly realized that the reason the people were not entering the confessional was because of a man standing in the front of the confessional who appeared to be waiting in line. Since the man was preventing anyone from approaching, St. Philip asked him if he wanted to go to confession. No, mumbled the man. Then would you please move, asked St. Philip, so that everyone else could go to confession. The man did not move from his position, so St. Philip asked him for a second time if he wanted to go to confession. Again, the man replied that he did not, and continued to stay in front of the confessional, his suspicion aroused. St. Philip took holy water and sprinkled the man with it, upon which the man disappeared, leaving a stench of sulfur. Although this event took place over 400 years ago, the devil still tries to put many obstacles in our path in order to prevent us from experiencing the true healing power of the sacrament of confession. So, just a powerful, powerful story of, how the devil does not want us to go to confession at all. Make it a habit. Make it go every week, go every other week. I know people that, one of my best friends goes to confession I think it's every other week or something like that. And it's like, use it. God gave us tools to use. Holy water. Holy water is another big one. Have a little bottle or holy water font in your bedroom or wherever. Bring a holy water font with you to work. Sprinkle holy water around your house, around your property, around your workspace. You have a coworker you like a little questionable here, sprinkle some holy water on their desk when they're not looking, maybe. Holy water is powerful because the prayers that are prayed over that water and salt when it's blessed, that water when it's attached to a person or onto something, those prayers are like stuck with that. So like holy water is like super, super powerful. A lot more powerful than what we kind of think, it's just holy water, but I'll sign across and continue on my way when I go into church or leave church. It's like, no, we need to be using holy water probably multiple times a day, every day. That's not me that said that. That's a lot of saints that, multiple times a day. Another big one, the Mass, obviously. If you can go to daily Mass, it's huge. Even if it's just once, like maybe it's every Friday, 6 a.m. That's the only time that works. Or maybe it's 7 a.m. or something like that, But those days that you can't make it to Mass, doing the spiritual communion prayer. And there's a lot of saints there's one saint in particular, he would pray the spiritual communion prayer like 30-some times a day. And if you say that spiritual communion prayer, with the right heart and soul and mind, the same effects can happen when you physically receive the Eucharist at Mass. And so just a couple of ones to, really have in your pocket. The rosary, speaking of pocket, your rosary, having your rosary on you, that's a huge one. Because like the rosary is it's demons, well, by the human eye, you can't tell that I have a rosary in my pocket right now. But demons, the angelic world, they can see that I have a rosary in my pocket. And so, just things like that like you need to have your tool bag full, right? Know what tools you're using, know how to use them, because you got to defend yourself. If you don't have anything to defend yourself with, you're probably going to lose. You might not, but, there's probably a better chance that you would. So, and then my last thing I want to close with is something called the 1% challenge. So 24 hours in a day, 1% of 24 hours in a day is mathematically 14 minutes and 25 seconds. So round that up, 15 minutes. Challenge you guys, if you don't do this already, spend at least 15 minutes a day in prayer, or somehow give that to God. It could be 5 in the morning, 5 when you get home from work or school, or 5 before you go to bed, 15 minutes every single day. And maybe you're doing that, maybe, all right, good for you. Do 2%, a whopping 2%, because, we spend so much time at work and, family life and our friends. A lot of good things take a lot of time. But it's so easy, again, first thing that flies, that goes away when you get busy. And this happens to me all the time. Get super busy, what goes first is your prayer, honestly. So, got to keep that 1%. Because you think about your priority list, if God is number 1 on your priority list, hopefully you're at least giving him 1% of your day, right? So, that's about all I have.